Today, Bitcoin takes a breather from the recent gains. Ripple's co-founder urges Bitcoin to shift to proof of stake. A crypto project called Terra is emerging as a major buyer of Bitcoin. It's building up reserves for what's known as a stable coin, or a cryptocurrency pegged to the price of $1. The project confirming this week that it bought another $135 million worth of Bitcoin.
And the idea of inflation-proof property that cannot be confiscated by a hostile regime is a matter of life or death for hundreds of millions of people right now. So Bitcoin is like that. It's digital energy. And some people haven't adopted it because they don't have 1,000 hours or 100 hours to study it. And some people haven't adopted it because the regulatory guidelines are hostile to their business adopting it. And some people haven't adopted it because they're getting paid billions a year to do the opposite. So these are all reasons why the world doesn't just immediately change. But having said all that, the world is changing, right? I mean, Bitcoin was trading at $9,000 a coin, in June of 2020. And we're not 2 years later, and it's up by a factor of 4, right? So it is changing. Billions of dollars of capital are flowing. They may flow slower than some people would like, but it seems like it's the most disruptive force in the financial universe right now, and the world is waking up. I think that wars catalyze the adoption of new technology, and that's the history. What you learn in the history of science is that new technologies are oftentimes presented and then they're rejected by the establishment until there's a war. And when there's a war, all of a sudden we decide that we want to adopt new technology because we're more afraid of losing the war than we are afraid of the new technology. So, we've got a pandemic, a war on COVID, that accelerated all sorts of new technologies, including Bitcoin. I think the Ukrainian war has accelerated it some more, and a couple of different ways. First of all, you've got hundreds of millions of people in Eastern Europe who have their currencies collapsing. The Russian currencies collapse, but the Hungarian currency is weakening, the Ukrainian currency is weakening, the Polish currency is weakening, the Turkish currency is weakening. Every currency in that region is weakening, and some are completely collapsing. So people that earn money, the working class earns money in the currency or save money in the currency, are becoming insecure with their currency. The currency doesn't work anymore. The second is the banking systems are collapsing. If you wake up and you find out that there's a half-mile long line outside of an ATM for you to withdraw $33 in cash, then you realize the banks aren't serving you, the cash is not serving you, and you need a new form of currency or a new medium of exchange if you're going to get on with your life. And so that's happening in the Ukraine, but that also happened in Russia, right? Where they shut down the stock market, they shut down and the currency markets, etc. When the borders get closed, when the banks fail, when the stock markets fail, in the extreme situations like you see in Lebanon, where the banks literally freeze your assets, close, and then they devalue your assets by a factor of 10, then what you have is you have 400 million people directly affected where they can't trust their government, they can't trust their bank, they can't trust their currency. 400 million directly affected. What you have is 4 billion people watching, indirectly affected in two ways. First of all, everybody else in the world is suffering from inflation that's already rampant. We were already inflating the currency supply by about 15% a year or more before this. And then the response of Europe and the US to the war exacerbated the inflation, right? We drove up the price of energy. We're driving up the price of just about everything. We're impairing the supply chains. So you've got everybody in the Western world probably staring at 20% monetary inflation right now. They're losing 1 to 2% of the value in the euro and the dollar every month. Okay, that's also happening in China. So anybody in the world right now is getting a double dose of inflation because of this war. Every company is insecure about their treasury, and every individual becomes insecure because What you have is a precedent where a politician can, in Canada, we have a politician that seizes the money of the citizens of Canada without due process. And then you have the plight of the Russian oligarchs. Not very sympathetic, but a politician can seize the property of a citizen of another country without a war, without a law. And so who's going to be confident in their property rights if your own government doesn't seize your money? Then someone else's government will seize your money. If you don't own the country, if you don't control the government, you probably don't have any secure property. If you do own the country, all your property that's outside of your country is still insecure. So this is an unprecedented time of insecurity combined with inflation and literally the collapse of currencies and currency derivatives. You could look at this war as kind of a wake-up call for everybody in the world. If you're at all paying attention, what you would realize is you really want crypto property, right? Since I can't rely upon property in any country, and I can't rely on any currency, and I can't rely on any currency derivative. And a bond is a currency derivative, a swap is a currency derivative, a value stock is a currency derivative, a piece of real estate, commercial real estate that generates rents, is a currency derivative. So if I can't trust currency derivatives and I can't trust the government and I'm insecure about my property, what would you do? And the obvious answer is convert your property into crypto property or digital property, put it in cyberspace beyond the reach of any government or any other hostile action. And then make sure if it's crypto property, it's not a currency derivative, which means that it's inflation proof. And the idea of inflation proof property that cannot be confiscated by a hostile regime is a matter of life or death for hundreds of millions of people right now. Where I could just go buy $1 billion of Bitcoin in a spot ETF, then maybe I would do that. But of course, there isn't a spot ETF because there's regulatory inertia. Indefinite intangible accounting means that if I buy $1 billion of Bitcoin and it trades down by 50% and then it trades up by 1,000%, the fair value of it is $10 billion, but I would be showing it on my GAAP accounting statement as $500 million. And I would never write it up again. Okay, so if you're a publicly traded company and you have a successful business selling streaming video, and you have $10 billion of capital, and you go buy the Bitcoin and you make $100 billion for your investors, it'll look like you lost $5 billion for your investors. First of all, I think every month for the past 24 months, the environment's become more favorable. Like just last week, the President of the United States issued an executive order ordering every agency to figure out how to regulate and how to facilitate cryptocurrencies. And so now you could go back to your bank and you could say, the President of the United States says this is a force for good, and we need to figure out how to embrace this. Right here it is in black and white. Read the quote from Joe Biden. So 2 years ago, you didn't have that, right? And a year ago, you didn't have that. By the end of this year, there'll be like 36 or more publicly traded companies that own Bitcoin on their corporate balance sheets. And if you roll the clock back 2 years, there was pretty much no one, right? So it will progressively continue for the decade, from 2022 to 2030. I think these are going to be all big growth years. I think that if you look at the really monstrous companies with large treasuries, the number one structural impediment is the accounting treatment for GAAP purposes, because the accounting treatment injects a huge amount of volatility and opacity into both their P&Ls and their balance sheets. And if you have a healthy company that's making a lot of money, it looks like it's more trouble than it's worth. On the other hand, I think that the people that are really aggressively adopting and will continue to adopt will be individuals in the rest of the world, private companies. They don't have the same GAAP public optics concerns. Macroeconomic investors, they're realizing that gold is defective and they want something like gold, but they know that gold doesn't work. I think if you're looking for the catalyst, right, a spot Bitcoin ETF is catalyst. Right, if I'm a public investor and I've got a spot ETF, then I can put $1 billion into this in a heartbeat, right? I think the FASB will be a catalyst for big corporate public company adoption. I think FDIC guidance will be a catalyst for banks.